Hello there! Welcome back to the Level 2 lessons for the Star Wars Unlimited Judge Program. As always, I'm your host Jonah, and today I'll be talking about some common clarifications. The Comprehensive Rules strives to be exactly what it says on the front cover, comprehensive. However, the game is a complicated one, and new cards are released regularly, and sometimes there's a clash between technical language and common use language, and so there's frequently some confusion about how cards work. This is where the clarifications come in. Both judges and players frequently seek more insight into how the game is supposed to work, and the designers and developers have been very generous in responding to online questions, as well as questions submitted through the judge program. Last week, I talked about how having consistent rules prevents players and judges from having to memorize specific rulings for particular interactions. But, as mentioned above, the rules, while they strive towards comprehensiveness, don't hit that mark in every section of the rules, especially for cards that are doing weird and niche things. So, clarifications. If you want to follow along with these next few lessons and see the original source from the developers answering the questions, check out nexus.cascadegames.com/resources/rules clarifications. We're going to focus this lesson on frequently asked questions that focus more on individual cards as opposed to broader sections of the rules or whole mechanics. We're not even going to get through all of them, as there are quite a few. But without further ado, let's dive in. For a Cause I Believe In has two clarifications that I want to touch on today. The first is actually one that applies to several cards, but is exemplified in For a Cause. When an ability instructs a player to do something multiple times for each to one object, that results in one instance of the effect. That means For a Cause is one instance of damage, not potentially up to four. Similarly, Kanan Jarrus, Revealed Jedi, is one instance of healing. Force Lightning is another single instance of damage, and Lieutenant Chilson has one instance of gaining experience tokens. This can cause some confusion due to the wording for each, creating multiple simultaneous effects on multiple objects, such as on Calculated Lethality or Count Dooku, Fallen Jedi. Those also happen simultaneously, but are separate instances, and so could potentially cause multiple instances of a triggered ability. This is covered in the rules in 8.35. The other clarification currently only affects For a Cause I Believe In, as it is the only card that reveals a set of cards and then returns them to a hidden, ordered zone. The cards remain revealed until they're returned to the deck, and consequently, if multiple cards are returned to the deck, any opponent is able to know the order in which they were returned. That information is not private. Both Bossk hunting his prey and Grand Admiral Thrawn, how unfortunate, have triggered abilities that have a triggering condition based on other triggered abilities that have a condition unit dying. That's a lot of words, and a lot of the word trigger, to say that Bossk and Thrawn are looking to see other units be defeated. However, on a technical level, their abilities are looking to see the resolution of the triggers. If Bossk or Thrawn aren't in play when the trigger they could potentially be doubling is resolving, because they were defeated at the same time as the unit that had the ability, they don't trigger. We mentioned this briefly in the level 1 lessons, but abilities that affect how a card is played only affect that card if it says that it applies while playing. Omega, part of the squad's constant ability, doesn't apply to herself. Her ability only applies to clones played while she is already in play. To clearly demonstrate the difference, Rey, Keeping the Past, has a similar ability, but it specifies while playing this unit, which allows it to function in out-of-play zones. Rook, Thrawn's assassin, has a powerful ability that allows him to take out units even if his power wouldn't normally defeat them. A lot of people intuit that if you give him the ability to deal damage first, for example with Shoot First, that he will defeat the defending unit before it has the opportunity to deal damage back, no matter how much HP it has. Unfortunately, their intuition is wrong. Combat damage is one step, and triggers that occur during combat damage don't resolve until all combat damage has fully resolved. So, Rook would still deal his 4 damage first, his ability would trigger but not resolve, and then if the defending unit still has more than 0 HP, it would deal its damage back to Rook. Finally, after that, Rook's ability would resolve with the same timing it normally would. The Shoot First ability, which has shown up on a few other cards, doesn't create an extra combat damage step, and therefore does not create a new window for triggers to resolve. Shields are something that we're all familiar with. They prevent the next instance of damage, but how do they really work? That might sound like a silly question, so let's ask some more specific questions. You control an Outer Rim Outlaws with a shield counter on it. Can you smuggle out First Light, headquarters of the Crimson Dawn, by damaging your outlaws? What if you just played the outlaws while you controlled a Toro Calican, ambitious upstart? What happens if the outlaws are dealt indirect damage? What about if the outlaws are attacked by an opponent's Rook, Thrawn's assassin? Let's go through these one at a time. When paying the costs of dealing damage, it only matters that the process of dealing damage is begun, not that it results in damage being dealt. That means you can damage a shielded unit to pay the smuggle cost of First Light. Similarly, you may, if you do abilities, check to see if you said yes to the first action, but don't check to see how it resolves. So if you say yes, deal the damage, and the damage is prevented by the shield or another effect, Toro will still ready. Of course, you could also sequence the triggers so Toro resolves before the shield and avoid this question altogether. The indirect damage question is straightforward enough once you've read the full text of shield and the rules for indirect damage. Indirect damage is unpreventable, and shield says prevent that damage. If you do, defeat a shield token. Because the damage isn't prevented, no token is defeated, and the outlaws take a point of damage. Finally, we look at Rook's trigger. This one requires you to deal damage, but if the damage never happens because it's prevented, there's no condition to cause the trigger to happen. This is different from the first two scenarios because this is looking for something specific to occur, the damage, not to see if you're beginning the process of dealing damage. This is one of the rule sets I most frequently get asked about and is certainly confusing at times. This one is mostly about Boba Fett Daimyo, but it also covers the Ghost, Heart of the Family. If a unit has a conditional keyword, like on Gamorrean Retainers or Emperor's Royal Guard, it only has that keyword while the condition is active, so it would only get the buff from Boba some of the time. Similarly, Coordinate is a keyword that sometimes grants a different keyword. The unit always has at least Coordinate, so Boba would always apply, and every Spectre would have the Coordinate ability, but wouldn't necessarily gain any bonuses from that Coordinate ability. For Boba, piloting is also a keyword that the unit always has, even if it's not in the unit part of the text box. Any abilities that are in a separate part of the text box, unless otherwise specified, still count for Boba. Furthermore, Smuggle remains a keyword even after the unit was played, unless it only had Smuggle due to another effect, like Tech, who grants Smuggle to your resources and not to your cards. But let's go back to Coordinate for a second. If you upgrade the Ghost with For the Republic, then every other Spectre gets Coordinate, Restore 2. If you have Coordinate, in addition to having the Coordinate keyword, the Ghost now also has the Restore keyword, and that would propagate to your other Spectres, which already have the Coordinate Restore 2. This would result in them having Restore 4 and the Ghost having Restore 2. Like with Coordinate, the Ghost copies the whole of any bounty abilities it gains with every other Spectre. If your opponent puts a Bounty Hunter's Quarry on your Ghost and then plays Super Laser Blast, they're about to do a whole lot of searching. This is because both Coordinate and Bounty include the effect after the dash as part of the ability, and so when the ability is copied anywhere, that goes with them. When Barriss Offee, Unassuming Apprentice, was first revealed, there were a few questions about how she functioned for many players. To many, her ability reads like a trigger because it sometimes applies to some units and sometimes doesn't. This led to 3 frequent questions about her ability. 1. Does it apply to units that were healed in the phase before she was played? Does it apply to units that were healed in that phase after she was played? And does it continue to apply to units after she leaves play? The answer to all 3 of these comes from the fact that her ability is a constant ability and not a triggered ability. Some people thought it was a triggered ability and therefore would only apply to units that had already been healed when she came into play, while others thought that she needed to be in play to see the unit be healed in order to apply to it. But neither of those are true. She applies both to units that were healed in that phase before she entered play and to those that were healed after she entered play, because it's a constant ability and constantly checks to see if a unit was healed this phase. If it was, it gets the buff. For the same reason, that buff ceases to apply as soon as Barriss leaves play because the ability no longer exists. No Glory Only Results is a card that has a couple of questions about it, as players can frequently have different opinions of how abilities should work during the resolution of an event or another ability based on their experience with other games. The 2 most common versions of No Glory questions stem from 2 different legendary cards from Shadows of the Galaxy, Krayt Dragon and Supreme Leader Snoke, Shadow Ruler. If you play No Glory on your opponent's Krayt Dragon or Snoke, what happens? For the first, when no glory is played, the Krayt Dragon will trigger. However, as we've discussed many times, triggers that come from a card being played won't resolve until that card has finished resolving itself. That means that you take control of the Krayt Dragon and then defeat it. Then the trigger occurs. Many players equate taking control of a unit to taking control of all of its triggers as well. However, once an ability is triggered, it will resolve independently of its source. You don't gain control of it because it's a separate game object from the unit itself, and it doesn't go away despite the dragon being defeated for the same reason. Consequently, your opponent still gets to decide where the 5 damage goes. With Snoke, on the other hand, you control him, and while you do, during the resolution of the event, his constant ability will continue to apply. Any units your opponent have will be affected by the -2/-2, and if they only had 1 or 2 remaining HP, they'll be defeated due to game state maintenance during the resolution of the event. After they're defeated, the event will continue to resolve, and Snoke will be defeated. This is commonly misunderstood because some other games don't perform game state maintenance during the resolution of events, and would only check after no glory finishes resolving. The last one we have for today is Reckless Torrent. If you play it and your opponent controls a ground unit, but you don't, can you deal damage to that ground unit? This is mostly a question of templating, and effectively reads, choose an arena, then deal 2 damage to a friendly unit and 2 damage to an enemy unit in that arena. That means you can pick a half-empty arena and damage only your opponent's unit if you don't have one in that arena when the trigger resolves. This is different from Asajj Ventress, I Work Alone, whose ability has a conditional of if you do damage a friendly unit. In any case, that's all for now. Wait, what about Lurking TIE Phantom? Isn't that a card that has a ton of individual questions and clarifications? Well, we're saving it for next time because that also covers Chewbacca, Faithful First Mate, and Shattered Intentions. It's a growing group of cards and is a whole lot of content. So, join us next time as we cover those broader clarifications, as well as Darth Maul, Chancellor Palpatine, and Clone. If you're watching this on YouTube and you want more Level 2 lessons in your feed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Join us Tuesdays and Fridays, generally speaking, on twitch.tv/SWU_judges for live broadcasts covering the content of these lessons as they're released, and of course, join the Star Wars Unlimited Judge Program Discord to join the community in discussion of this and much, much more. As always, good luck and have fun.